All right, for topic two, we're going to look at comparing fractions and decimals, and we're also going to look at putting a list of fractions and decimals in order from smallest to largest, okay? We already talked about this with just decimals, so now we're going to bring fractions into the mix, okay? So steps to compare fractions and decimals. It is going to be easiest to convert your fractions to decimals and then compare the decimals like we would have done earlier in this chapter, okay? So for example 3, it says insert a less than or greater than symbol so that each statement is true. Please recall the inequality symbol that looks kind of like a squished uppercase L stands for lowercase. Good gracious. It stands for less than, y'all. So this one stands for less than. So if it looks like an L that's been kind of squished, think L for less than, and the other one is greater than. And the way these work is the point points towards the smaller number and the wide open part of the inequality symbol points towards the larger number. Okay, so for example 3, again, we're going to insert less than or greater than so that each statement is true. Now, I have 1/5 compared to 0.25. So it's easier, in my opinion, to convert your fraction to a decimal and compare your decimals because otherwise you would have to convert your decimal to a fraction, get LCDs, equivalent fractions, the whole bit. Okay, so let's look at figuring out what 1/5 is equal to as a decimal. So I'm going to take 1 and I'm going to divide by 5. Well, I know that 5 won't go into 1, but if I add a decimal and a 0 and pull that decimal up into the quotient, I can pretend my 1.0 is really just a 10. So 5 goes into 10 2 times, and 2 times 5 is 10. I've already got my 0 remainder, so I can say that 1/5 is equal to 0.2. So I've got 0.2 and 0.25. Well, remember when we were talking about comparing decimals, I said that if you can give your decimals the same number of decimal places, I've got to sneeze, that's equivalent to finding basically an LCD. So if I go ahead and add a 0 right here, I'm really kind of secretly looking at 20 over 100 and 25 over 100. And as long as we have a common denominator, it's really easy to compare fractions. We just compare the numerators. So which is bigger, 20 or 25? Well, 25 is definitely bigger than 20. So I would say 20 hundredths is less than 25 hundredths. So 0.2 is less than 0.25, which finally tells me 1/5 is less than 0.25. Okay? Let's look at part B. So for part B, we have 0.72, and we want to compare it to 5/7. So let's figure out what 5/7 is equal to. Okay? So I want to take 5 and divide it by 7. Well, 7 doesn't go into 5, but if we add a decimal and a 0 and pull the decimal up into the answer, we can pretend that 5 is 50. So 7 will go into 50 7 times. 7 times 7 is 49. Okay? So let's see, 50 minus 49 is 1. So add a 0 and drop it down. 7 will go into 10 one time. 1 times 7 is 7, so I'm left with a 3. 7 will go into 34 times, so I'm left with 28. I get a 2. I could add one more 0. So 7 will go into 20 twice, which gives me 14 with 6 left over. I could keep dividing, but look, we only have 2 decimal places here and here. So let's look at this one to like 3 decimal places. So I have 0.714, okay? So we're looking at 0.72 compared to 0.714. Well, I could go ahead and add a 0 after 0.72. That's the equivalent of giving me an LCD. So this is like looking at 720 over 1,000 compared to 714 over 1,000. Well, as long as my denominator is the same, I just compare my numerators. So 720 over 1,000 is more than 714 over 1,000, which tells me 0.72 is more than 0.714, which finally tells me that 0.72 is greater than 5/7. Okay? So that is how you compare a fraction and a decimal. Now, when it comes to putting groups of numbers in order from smallest to largest, we're going to follow the same general idea. Okay? So I know I'm comparing 1.26 to then 1 point or 1 and 1/4 and then 1 and 2/5. So let's look at 1 and 1/4. So this is going to be 1.26. This is going to be 1 point something. And this is going to be 1 point something. Okay? So let's look at 1/4. So 1/4 is really 1 divided by 4. 4 won't go into 1, but we can pretend 1 is a 10 by adding a decimal and a 0. 4 will go into 10 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. I subtract and get a remainder of 2. Add a 0 and drop it down. 4 goes into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. I get my 0 remainder. So I can say that 1/4 is 0.25. So 1 and 1/4 is 1.25. Okay? Now let's look at 2/5. Let's see what 2/5 is equal to. So I need to take 2 and divide it by 5. Well, 5 won't go into 2, but we can pretend 2 is a 20. So 5 will go into 24 times. 4 times 5 is 20. I've got my 0 remainder, so 2/5 is 0.4, which tells me that 1 and 2/5 is 1.4, but I'm going to go ahead and add a 0 so that everything has 2 decimal places. So that's like comparing 26 over 100 to 25 over 100 to 40 over 100. Which one is smallest? Well, 25 is the smallest numerator, so this is going to be the smallest. 26 is the next smallest, and 40 is the biggest, okay? So when I finally put these numbers in order, I would say it's 1 and 1/4, comma 1.26, comma 1 and 2/5. So this is the final answer right here, okay? Now we can do the same thing with 3/7, 0.4, and 0.41. We need to figure out what 3/7 is equal. So I'm going to take 3 and divide it by 7. Well, 7 won't go into 3, but we can pretend 3 is 30. 7 will go into 30 4 times. 4 times 7 is 28. 30 minus 28 is 2. I need to keep dividing, so let's see, I'm going to add another 0 and see, let's see, 7 will go into 20 twice. So 2 times 7 is 14. And I get a remainder of 6, but I'm going to stop here because these two decimal places, or these two decimals, they have 1 decimal place and 2 decimal places. So as long as I have 2 decimal places that are different, I can compare. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is approximately 0.42. So we're comparing 0.42, 0.40, and 0.41. So this is like 42 over 100. This is like 40 over 100. And this one is like 41 over 100, so which is the smallest? Well, 40 over 100 is smallest. Next is 41, and then finally 42. So let's put these numbers in order. So smallest to largest, I would have 0.4, 0.41, and then finally 3/7. Okay, so when you're comparing or ordering decimals and fractions, it's easiest to convert your fractions to decimals and then perform whatever you need to. Okay.